right, welcome everybody. We thought we would switch things up a little bit today and take advantage of both Kaylee and myself being just outside of Boston and co-locate ourselves and have a kind of a fireside chat, a informational conversation about artificial intelligence today. And so my guest is Kaylee Eastman. Kaylee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. Hello, I'm Kaylee. I'm a sales and marketing professional here outside of Boston. And when it comes to AI, I'm going to consider myself a cautious optimist. I think realistically, anyone who's watching the news or keeping up with tech would say that AI is going to become, or if it's not already, a massive industry. So in 2023, the Gen AI market prediction was $1.3 trillion. But now, this past April, a new study came out and it's projected to become a $4.8 trillion industry. And I think there's so much stigma about AI, and it's going to become that big of an industry. It's really important to have conversations like this. So I'm really excited to dive into it with Mark today.
All right. I love it. So it's interesting because the stats that you just quoted, they're about Gen AI.
Yeah.
And so we both do quite a bit in marketing. And so Gen AI has really taken things by storm. AI is a lot of different things. So I think one of the kind of foundational concepts that we want for people to understand is that there's lots of different kinds of AI.
Exactly.
And all AI isn't the same. So your quotes were about generative AI. Back in the day, so my tech history starts with metadata, big data. And so there was a really big thing when we were talking about big data, we were talking about predictive analytics. And that, for me, was the beginning of artificial intelligence, was really using algorithmic technologies in order to help forecast trends and to analyze data. And then since then, I've gotten into Gen AI, and we've done some Gen AI projects together. And so it's really kind of neat to think about AI as being this very broad, kind of nebulous thing.
Yeah.
And that's maybe an opportunity for people to figure out what AI needs to be for them.
Exactly.
And what pieces of it that they might want to use either to make themselves more creative or more productive or more efficient.
Yeah, productivity and efficiency is definitely very huge, saving a lot of time for more like repetitive, tedious tasks, especially. I think that that's a very big deal, and it's going to become a very big deal in that industry.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting too, because I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I can't remember the name of it, but I will grab it and we'll put it in the show notes. But they were talking about how last year, 2023 to 24, that about 30% of marketing professionals were saying that they were using AI. And now it's 60% of professionals are using AI. But there's not really any quantitative data, like exactly what parts of AI that they're using.
Yeah, I think it's very important because I have heard like stats about companies like implementing AI and having their employees use AI. But I also see a lot of professionals using AI without like not necessarily like permission, but without any kind of frameworks or playbooks provided for them by their employer. So that also like touches upon like some risks, like compliance risks, data privacy risks, especially with like more like parented information. Like if employees don't have that kind of structured playbook or structured like governance by their employers, they like have that risk of kind of leaking important information.
They do.
There were like a few case studies that I read. I think maybe it was Samsung. There were some engineers using ChatGPT to help code certain softwares, and there was a little bit of a data breach with that case, which was interesting. I think that just goes to show how important it is for employers and companies to really pay attention to this industry and to new solutions, talk to their employees, figure out what they want to use AI for, and what the best practice is for them to apply it to make sure that these issues are minimized.
It's really interesting that you're talking about the data part of it and the privacy part of it, because OpenAI, we're sitting here in late October 2025, and OpenAI just got a subpoena to expose the chats and expose the user account associated with some inappropriate use of AI. I think it was child pornography. I'm pretty sure. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll put that in the show notes as well. But it does bring to mind this thing about how when you're using it in the corporate sense, that you need to use it responsibly, but also kind of, that's a little bit of a no-brainer. But when you think about it from a personal perspective, understanding that potentially your chats could be subpoenaed if you're doing something inappropriate, that's a little scary. So
definitely something I'm worried about, how like consumers are using AI for things that aren't so good. Yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to need like more frameworks on. I think AI companies need to do better when it comes to providing their solutions to make sure things like that don't happen.
Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm.
Another announcement, OpenAI has recently announced that if you're age verified, there's going to be the opportunity to have erotic chat with ChatGPT. So yeah, there's just a lot going on. I think that's great. So I think that, if anything, I mean, we're just getting into the beginning of the conversation. We haven't really gotten into the nuts and bolts of using AI yet, but it's important, I think, to understand that it's a lot of different things for a lot of different people.
Exactly.
And, it's a technology being used by individuals too. It's not just on the corporate side.
Yeah.
Technology a lot of times starts in corporate and then comes into consumer, but this is kind of happening simultaneously. The advances are happening for both user groups.
Yeah, I think that, like, given the stat that I gave earlier, how huge of an industry that AI is bound to become, it's really important that we have conversations like this. We talk about how we can make responsible AI more prevalent, because if we don't, then the majority of the companies and the people using AI in the future, like that multi-billion-dollar industry, is going to be primarily made up of bad actors if there aren't people like actively having these conversations and actively trying to use AI for good. Like, we want that industry to be doing stuff that's good, not stuff like erotic chat bots. Like, what does that do for anybody? That's and like AI slop, like the AI slop I see on social media, like
some of it's really bad,
ridiculous stuff, and misinformation, like the news things that I'm seeing, like deep fakes of politicians of like, it's no good.
The deep fakes are scary, and different countries address that in different ways. So some countries are actually enacting laws that say that you cannot use a famous person, use their likeness, and then construct a video that might purport them as doing anything from adult entertainment to political statements to acting, right? So actors, I remember years ago when they were first talking about deep fakes, they weren't really using the term AI, they were using the term deep fake.
Yeah.
And, a lot of actors being concerned because the studios were wanting to 3D scan their faces.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew what that was for. That was so that they could be animated using deep fake technologies. And, we've seen things like that in, The Matrix and things where Keanu Reeves was animated. And so, we've kind of gotten used to it a little bit of at a time, because Matrix has been out quite a while. It's a relatively older movie at this point. But, this is really scary. The first one that I really saw that got me interested, but then it also got me freaked out, was the Tom Cruise deep fake, where there was a man on social and he was just acting like Tom Cruise. And he had the emotions and the physicality of Tom Cruise also down. So he was like imitating him and using his deep fake face. And that was when I first realized, oh my goodness, there's going to be a point where we can't tell the difference between a live human being and a deep fake.
Yeah, it's crazy how like good it's gotten. And I look at videos that were generated like a few years ago, like the Will Smith eating the spaghetti one.
Yes.
Like, it's crazy how real things look now. Like the bunnies jumping on the trampoline and remember that?
It's so real, right?
Yeah.
And then we did an experiment together. So we took some of my footage and ran it through Hey Jen and a few others to just kind of see
like which one looked and sounded the
most like me. And I had very unusual teeth, and so it was very interesting to see the animation, it kind of puts these movie star smiles and movie star teeth on everybody, which I think is funny.
I am starting to see like AI generated people in commercials now, and it's pretty obvious to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've seen like a few like stock video style like on TV, but then on social media, the ads, I keep getting this ad for like a dating app, and it's these AI generated people like talking about their experience with the app, and it just like looks so fake. And especially for like, I think for something like something as human centered as like a dating app, like it shouldn't have that kind of marketing. It's a people based.
Yes, it's about humanity.
It's the purpose of that app is to connect people, and it's using those kind of ads. It rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. I feel like people need to, or companies specifically need to kind of address like who their target audience is, what their mission is, and like just kind of break down like the values of their company and what kind of types of marketing they should do to attract their target audience. I don't think using AI generated people for like people centered solutions is the answer.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I think sometimes people get excited about it because they're like, oh, this is a way that I can scale my social. I can scale my advertising and not spend as much money. And so they find it kind of exciting from that perspective. But, and I've said this quote multiple times, and it's cliche at this point, but it's, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And making those trade-offs, I think, are really important. And if you have the ethical lens, you have the customer lens, then it kind of helps you make better decisions of where to use AI. I do know of some folks who are in specifically content marketing and digital marketing who are getting pressure from the top down to cut budgets. And so that's one of the ways that they're trying to cut the budget, is saying, okay, I can animate a lot of this, and it will allow me to produce the content, the volume of the content that I want to produce at a cost that my boss is saying I have to stay within. But there's another cost to it. It's just not a money cost. It's a reputation cost and a customer trust.
Yeah, a lot of people are like forgetting that quantity doesn't always equal quality.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Back to like the deep fake thing, I wanted to like touch upon, I feel like a lot of people, like individual consumers, are having a lot of fun with this and uploading like pictures of themselves to create like avatars of themselves, to create like videos of them doing like silly things, like content. I see a lot of like influencers and content creators doing that, like for the fun of it. But it makes me worried because I feel like a lot of people aren't reading like the terms, because some of these companies might just, now they own your likeness if you're doing that. So definitely, if that's something you're thinking about, read the terms and conditions and be careful, because you don't want to like see your face on some AI generated ad like 20 years from now because you like uploaded it to a database. That's like something I'm afraid of.
And it's kind of interesting because we're giggling about it, but I do think it's a real potential exploitation. I can just draw from a whole different industry, which is the 23andMe, where people uploaded their genetic data under a certain terms of service and privacy expectation. And then the terms of service changed, and now they're selling the data. And so you have to think about those other potential scenarios and just say, okay, like, who do I actually trust with my information? So we made the conscious decision which platforms we were going to try and load my face into. And we were picky about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity. It just needs to be, it needs to be balanced and thought about smartly.
Responsible. Right. I have a question for you. What do you think about everybody talking about the AI bubble? Do you think it's real? Is it a bubble? Is it not a bubble? What do we do if it is? What do we do if it isn't? What do you think? Because I'm hearing a lot of different...
I think on the stock side, it may be a bubble. You go through this whole disillusionment, and once reality sets in about what things really are and how they're going to be used. I don't think it's a bubble, though, in terms of creating work product. And AI is going to be here. It's just, to me, it's as transformative as the internet. And I think it's going to be here for a long time. But I also think that correlating the stock and the company valuations is a very different concept than whether or not it's going to become part of our plumbing for how we get work done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I actually separate the two, and I think about the stock market one way, and then I think about the use of the technology in another.
Mm-hmm. Something I read recently. So AI chip makers like NVIDIA are making huge profits because the demand for their chips massively exceeds the supply. And AI companies like OpenAI have soaring valuations, but very little revenue. Like they're actually losing money for every person that's using it, regardless if it's like single user, like corporate company, their payment plans, like they're still losing money from each of these users. And there's many deals between NVIDIA, OpenAI, and data center companies, and the venture capital-backed AI startups are kind of appearing like in this circular graph. With NVIDIA is investing in the companies, and then the money that they're investing into these companies, those companies are using that money to buy chips from NVIDIA.
Oh,
and this props up NVIDIA chip demand and stock value, even though the actual business value that's being created by AI services is far smaller. And
interesting.
this makes me worried about this bubble dynamic driven by like financial loops rather than a real market demand. Yeah. So what do you think about that?
Okay, interesting. I don't know. I just think it's kind of early to know for sure how all the valuation and everything is going to stick out, how it's going to turn out. I'm a lot older than you, so I've been through a lot of innovation cycles with tech and kind of seeing them.
The .com bubble.
I was around for the .com and Y2K and a bunch of other things. There's been a whole bunch of things I've been around for, and eventually you just, you hit a point of stasis where the market expectation is aligned with how the technology is actually being used. And, that can take 3 years, 5 years, or 30 years. It really depends on the technology. I think mostly I don't try and predict it. I just try to stay informed. And then that helps me make better decisions.
Yeah, what I'm hoping is that the AI companies that are developing like real solutions, like in healthcare, in environmental impact, ones that are like just genuinely like creating solutions for humanity, I really hope that those ones skyrocket, and I hope that AI slop kind of falls down.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping for. Like, I don't want... And the dead internet theory, I feel like it's definitely contributing to that. Are you aware of the dead internet theory?
I am, but let's go ahead.
Yeah. So basically the dead internet theory is that the internet is just made up of bots, everything's fake, artificial, and the goal is just to keep you engaged, to keep scrolling, keep you on your screen as most as possible. And it's increasingly like, I feel like the internet started as this place where people can connect, people can exchange information, and now it's just so loaded with crap. And now even more like AI slop and misinformation. So I think that AI is definitely contributing to the dead internet. And I'm hoping that people notice this and it comes out like a better internet kind of comes out of this.
I love that. And in the meantime, people need to be more discerning and need to have their own value judgments for how they want to interact with technology, how they want to interact with social, and that's something where, if you're an adult, you can make those decisions for yourself. And if you're a parent, educating your children and helping them understand the difference and helping them understand how they may be manipulated. And even a 9, 10, or 11-year-old can understand the concept of an algorithm and how things can be fine-tuned to kind of hold your attention. Teaching them early in order to be able to discern the difference between quality content and not quality content. And then knowing the difference and having them be self-modulated in terms of how much time they spend, whether it's, social, gaming, any variety of things that are going to be touched by tech. I just think that that's part of a value system. And eventually what winds up happening is markets adjust back to realities, but it's elastic for a period of time where things go to the extreme and then eventually they come back to some sort of center position. So I'm sure that's going to happen over time. Don't know exactly when. I don't have a crystal ball, and certainly I thought maybe I had a good idea of how fast AI was going to ramp, but I was wrong. So it's going much faster and much broader, much broader than I thought. The other thing I wanted to mention was, we talked a lot about whether or not people are using AI or not. Quite a lot of platforms that marketers use are starting to be AI enabled. And so even if they're not using it independently with something like Claude or ChatGPT, oftentimes they can be using a AI feature within something else that they use. So for example, Canva has some, Gen AI art capabilities and whatnot. So some of these platforms have artificial intelligence in there. And then companies like HubSpot and EngageBay are starting to use AI to help people write better outgoing emails and, deal with incoming support calls and all of those sorts of things. So that's more on the personal interaction level than the Gen AI in the context of art or writing. It's more dynamic and something where it's trying to enhance the relationship between the brand and the people in the way that the marketing is used and fine-tuning it and personalizing it to the individual. So there's just so much. Yeah. There's so many different things going on. Most platforms now are claiming some level of AI.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Powered by AI first. I don't think any company should be AI first. I think every company should be people first. But I am seeing a lot of that in some marketing campaigns, which I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
People first always.
Yeah.
People over profit, people over AI. That's like what we're all here to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's why in our professional lives and in our personal lives, we focus on people and we have kind of that ethical lens that we look through. Not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And, knowing the difference, I think, is also really important when it comes to working with people or an organization that's using AI, understanding how they're using it and are they using it in an ethical way.
Exactly. I'm curious. Could you tell me a little bit about your early AI experimentation?
Oh, man.
Your journey of just discovering AI, what you first thought about it, and maybe some of the first experiences that you had with AI.
Okay. I'll limit this to Gen AI because I think that's more of the audience here than talking about predictive data, which I think will bore most people. So if you talk about Gen AI, I was using some really, really early artistic Gen AI and some really, really early music Gen AI. I wasn't really using it for writer. And part of that was my own ego because I considered myself to be a good writer that I didn't need help. And so I was focusing more on the creative side, also because I was doing it during my personal time. It certainly wasn't mature enough that I could integrate anything into my work or workflow. It just wasn't at that level. So it was more a matter of what I wanted to do for myself creatively. It was interesting. So parts were, giving maybe a 1-sentence prompt. You also didn't have a lot of prompt engineering back in the day. You would just say, there's a famous one like Panda riding a skateboard or something like that. You had a sentence that you could do, and then in some of the art ones, you could choose an artistic style, like, oh, I would like this as a pencil sketch, or I would like this as an impressionist painting, or I would like this as a mosaic. Artistic filters are very similar to what Adobe's been doing for 30 years and just applied it into an image it created, and then it would spit it out to you. And you might get 2 or 4 different ones to choose from. And then you would download it, and it was, it just wasn't the same level. But it was still fun because I was learning. The music was really bad.
Yeah.
So my original AI music that I would try and generate really, there should have been a penalty for that. That it was not good. But now with, in particular, Suno, which, I've been generating some AI music with Suno, and that has been a really, really fun and awesome experience.
Was that the one that you used in the beginning too? When you first started?
Mm-mm. In fact, it was interesting because I was looking back through some of my old bookmarks, and a lot of the older AI tools that I used to use, they don't even exist any longer. I don't know if they got purchased and snapped up into some of these other companies, or if companies leapfrog them and they just became obsolete. Even if they were early innovators, there's no stickiness.
Mm-hmm. That's also like really important when you're looking at like certain tech solutions, certain vendors, doing like a deep dive into that, because one, like you can build entire infrastructure based on this tech and then the next day they're gone. So that's like something very important. Like vendor dependence is something important when you're trying to figure out how you want to integrate this tech, like who you want to use.
That's really important. And making sure that you're downloading, like download your assets. Don't count on the SaaS being there, because the SaaS may disappear and you've got all of your stuff loaded in there and now you don't have access to it. So download everything that you're creating that you like,
and make sure that like what you're downloading, check out like the copyright, like what kind of data it's trained on. I like read a case somewhere someone was generating images. I can't remember which image generator it was, but actual like watermarks were coming out. What's the like eye stalk? Like distorted like eye stalk,
as if it had a watermark on it.
Yeah, were coming out. So
they were training it then with the eye stalk.
Exactly. They're obviously like training this data on images that they don't have the rights to. So therefore, like you can be penalized for that if you're using something that you generated and it's like stealing another person's unique artwork. That's very important to consider, because you don't want to steal from somebody else without giving them credit.
And you don't have a lot of control over what they're using as their training data. It's not like you get to pick, I only want the output that would have been trained on XYZ. You don't get to do that. But one of the things you can do when you do generate artwork is you can use Google Lens and go and see if there's something really similar to it already out on the internet. And if so, you can make a judgment call to say, you know what, that's just a little too close to comfort to that artist or that model or whatever, and I just don't feel right about using it, and so I'm not going to. Yeah. You can alter your prompt a little bit to change the picture a little bit so it doesn't look so much like that other piece, and then, test that again and then go with it. So
that reminds me of like early on, like in generative AI, I was working on a project creating an interface with like a lot of different assets, and I would like make these drawings. I would draw them out in my sketchbook. Like I think I made like 3 in Illustrator, and I think Illustrator had just come out with its generative AI feature, and I was able to kind of put my own drawings, my own unique style drawings into Illustrator. And then when I used the generative AI, I had it like use my particular style, and I like it was partially like trained on my style, and that's like it looks similar to my drawings, look similar to my style, had the same color palette, and it like fit right in, honestly, with like the drawings that I was doing. So I felt like that was like a more like ethical way of going about it, because it wasn't stealing anybody else's concepts or anybody else's style.
I like that. So it's interesting that you talk about training the AI on the look and feel that you wanted, because Claude recently came out with the ability to add skills where you can train Claude to have things like your brand playbook or the document that describes your voice, etc. And you're basically giving Claude a skill. And then you can tell it to invoke that skill in order to generate a work product for you. So I love that idea, because whether it's your messaging and positioning about how you want to talk about your company or yourself, whatever the content is, but also the look and the feel. It's really wonderful if you can kind of save some of the after editing by having it just be part of the core of what it's generating for you in the first place. So if you're not already using Claude, because I know so many people talk about ChatGPT, and I'm a ChatGPT super user, but if you haven't already started using Claude, the ability to really give it your own training information, I think is really key. I do that in ChatGPT too, because I use the project feature. And in the project feature, you can load in some files, and then you can tell it to read and absorb and follow the files in your prompting. You can tell it to use it as a resource. in addition to what you might have stored just in terms of your own preferences. So like one of my preferences that I have in ChatGPT is not to be sycophantic. So I don't want it just agreeing with me and telling me that I'm doing a great job. I want it to push back and be a critical thinker and to actually have a dialogue and give me constructive criticism like I would have with a teammate if we were debating something. And it just, the results, I think, come out better. So all those fine tunings that we're talking about are really key.
That's something that I do. So I use Notion. A lot of my writing, article writing, content creation, I draft out all the copywriting in Notion. And sometimes I'll use Notion AI and I'll say, pretend you are a editor and critique my article or critique my writing. And it'll just kind of roast me a little bit.
I love the roasting.
And it gives me feedback that otherwise I probably wouldn't have noticed. Like I'll be like, oh, this is perfect. And then it'll just like completely tear me down. And I have definitely improved work products because of that feature that otherwise I don't know. I mean, obviously, like I can have people review it, but it'll notice things that maybe like in typos too. Like I am notorious for grammar issues, misspelling things. Autocorrect has been my friend for a very long time. Yeah, definitely like those kind of like little like repetitive tasks, tedious things like that. I think it's helpful.
I love it. And I think one of the things that's important is kind of like a side note of this conversation entirely is don't necessarily get stuck in just one platform. So we're talking about ChatGPT. We're talking about Claude. I've used Copilot. I mean, pretty much any of them I've used.
There's Copilot for coding, and it's been pretty helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So Claude is good for coding as well. The biggest challenge with Claude, I think, on coding is you only get so many credits, even at the high end. And so if you're really trying to do a project on deadline, use those credits wisely because you can chew them up pretty quickly with coding.
I think it's like, especially like with coding that we're on the topic, for web designers, like they could design a website, design a platform in Figma or even like Illustrator, and then upload that to VS Code or any like kind of coding platform that has access to AI. And then it will just code that design for you. I mean, you'll probably have to like go in and fix a few things, but it's like a useful tool for designers that like their skills rely mostly in design. They only know like a little bit of code. Like that's how I am. I know like the structure of coding, but I'm not like perfect when it comes down to it. But having like AI as a tool for that definitely helps me learn more, like find my mistakes. It finds mistakes for me to fix. So yeah, like also brings me to talk about how AI is a much better tool than it is a replacement for people and autonomy. A lot of people like when we talk about like businesses going AI first. Another thing that I've heard is companies are saying that they won't hire for a role unless it's proven that it can't be done by AI. And that like kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit because I feel like a lot of applications for AI are when it's used as a tool by a person, not as a replacement for a person. There's so many mistakes that it can make. Like when we see, there was a few cases that I've read where people will use AI to do content creation and it'll be no person to double check it. And then all this misinformation goes out about whatever they're marketing for. That's like something that we need. We still need people to...
Still need people.
Exactly. I'll always need people. So I think that's another important thing to talk about.
I think this is one of the things where management teams who aren't practitioners, so they're the leaders, but they're not the ones who actually do the tactical work. They buy into the hype train and they put a mandate top down, but they don't really have the background information that they need in order to be practical about whether or not it should be implemented and in what context and all of that and sort of stuff. And so I think a lot of those companies that have done that, where leadership has said, okay, do this, this, and this now with AI, and you need a lot fewer people. And oh, by the way, lay off your team, and I want you to use AI. Number one, who's running the AI? It doesn't, as much automation as you want right now, it's not sentient and it's not able to completely do the role of a human being all by itself. But that being said, I think the leadership doesn't really understand the reality. They're buying into the hype.
AI is not magic.
Right. They're buying into the hype and they're thinking, oh, this is awesome. Look at this. It gives me a way to have better EBITDA and life is good. And I'm just going to have a lot fewer headcount and that's going to make my books better.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, there's always going to be a trade-off of some sort and there'll be a cost of some sort. And I've heard that a number of these employers who had laid off folks are now trying to hire them back because AI has been a failed experiment. I think if it's been a failed experiment, it's because it wasn't properly scoped in the first place.
People weren't strategic about it.
Right. For how it's supposed to be used and in what context and what workflow and with what autonomy and with what checks and balances. So it wasn't scoped properly in the first place, or it wouldn't have failed. Because any time that you do change management, and I've been in enterprise for a long time, anytime that you do change management on the IT or the systems level, you scope the project according to the capabilities of the system. And then if the system capabilities increase, then you rescope and you get the next phase of your project, and that's great. But it's not just the light switch. You just don't turn it on, and all of a sudden we're going to do all of our social from AI. And all of a sudden, we're going to do all of our tech support AI. We're going to throw our knowledge base behind a chat bot, and we don't ever have to talk to a human again. I mean, that's just not, it's just not reality. And any of us who've been on the consumer side of it and tried to engage with any of these technologies, it's still falling way short, I think. Unless you have a very basic question that you could just Google in the first place, it's just not there yet.
Yeah, I think people want human authenticity, especially now this big rise in bots and AI. I think AI is not a magical solution. And it's not going to change your company overnight just by implementing it. You need to be responsible. You need to be strategic. You need to break down what your goals are, what the different things that you can do to achieve that goal, and maybe how you can implement AI for those different parts, but not just all at once. Don't just throw AI on something and think it's going to make you a millionaire. I think people just need to be a little bit more strategic about it. Because what was that stat that just came out? 95% of AI companies aren't profitable right now.
Yeah, something like that.
I think that was an MIT study.
Yeah.
I can pull that up.
Yeah, well, we'll put that in the show notes too. It's not unusual in the early days of a new technology for whatever those technology companies are to not be profitable. That's not unusual. And in fact, during the dot-com era, there was way too much of that. But I think at the end of the day, it's perfectly reasonable to expect corporations to pay for the value that they get. So when AI gets to the point where it's hugely valuable and it does allow economies of scale and it is somewhat autonomous and you've got your workflows optimized and all that sort of stuff, that's great. The price for it should adjust accordingly. Not that I want to pay more for AI, don't get me wrong, but there has to be value-based pricing in there in some way so that the companies that are bringing the technology to the market can actually continue to do so. So, you don't want anything that you're relying on. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but you don't want anything that you're relying on to go under. And now all those custom interactions that you did and your integration with Make and your integration with Zapier and all those sorts of things don't work anymore because your core AI solution, wetted the bed. So, we just need to be really smart about it. And I think from an enterprise level, it also means executives need to make sure that the AI that they're bringing into the organization is rock solid, that they feel like it will be a going concern and it's going to be around long enough that your team can not only deploy it, but be able to measure and see the results of that deployment and make sure that it actually is delivering on the promise that you hoped when you first committed to doing the project or implementing the tech.
Yeah, and to talk about that study, so an MIT study called The State of AI in Business found that 95% of Gen AI pilots are failing. And this is because they're generic tools that sound cool in a demo, but then they just kind of diminish when they're actually put into the workflows. but they're just like stuck in that like high adoption, but like low transformation. And then we have the other 5% that's working on more like high value workflows. So it kind of sucks that the majority of these solutions right now aren't doing too well. But I think that 5%, hopefully they like work on creating like genuine solutions for people and genuine solutions to like help create more value for society. That's like what I want to see more of.
I love that. I love that. That ties back to the prior comment where we were talking about how things have to be properly scoped. And I feel bad because I wonder how many people's jobs or careers did they suffer the consequences of the executive team or the digital transformation team or an AI work group or whatever sending this stuff down, but then not giving them the tools, the resources, the understanding, the training so that they could be effective. Because that number seems outrageously high. It means, I think, that the projects were scoped too large for what it was that they were, their level of maturity. So there's this concept of a capability maturity model for any of you in enterprise. You'll have some understanding of that, but you basically have a level of maturity and capability within a company in order to execute against any kind of, business process or workflow. And in this context, those 95% of those projects, I would imagine that the lion's share of those were not properly scoped. They weren't properly resourced. The employees weren't trained on how to use it. And they just thought it was a quick fix, some sort of magic, shiny solution that was going to solve all their problems because they bought into the hype. And at the end of the day, they ended up, with some really bad experiences. And I imagine some careers were really damaged because of that, because that there had to be fall guys.
Yeah. I think we definitely need to like take a step back and just figure out where the valid innovation is and where the hype is. And because a lot of this hype, they're just kind of like overinflating their solutions. They're overinflating the value that they provide. And that's why we need to be like strategic when you're like trying to like vet certain solutions, certain vendors. Definitely be more strategic, definitely be more responsible so that these kind of things don't happen to your company.
Yep. I love that. That's a good word to the wise. I love it. So you use Gen AI a lot. So I'm just really curious what you're finding to be the most exciting or the things that are helping you the most.
Well, I definitely see AI as a tool, not like a replacement. I think of it kind of as an extension for my capabilities. And I like to experiment, like, especially when it first started coming out, I experimented with a lot, trying to figure out like what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and kind of like reducing that fear through understanding and figuring that out. I think that as a human, like I still need to do the strategic planning. I still need to do the decision making, the creativity, the innovation. But I think AI definitely helps when it comes with data computation, being able to provide it with a bunch of information and having it extract the information that I need, if that makes sense. Like brain dumping, like all my goals for a project, all the tasks I need to get done. And then maybe asking AI, like, what would be, like, what tasks should I do first? Which task is the most important? I mean, obviously I can probably figure that out myself, but for certain, it's like very dependent on what I'm doing. And kind of like treat it as like a partnership, not as a replacement. The AI processes the data, but I analyze the insights. Like, because when I use it for things like that, it frees up time for strategic thinking. It frees up time for me to get creative, for me to get innovative, for me to do the things that humans need to be doing rather than just tedious, repetitive things. That's what I'm excited for AI to do, for it to free up time for us to just be more human, and not have to like do the silly little tasks.
So I'm definitely using it for tasks, that's for sure. Anything that's repetitive, I've tried to make it automated. I have specific projects set up in ChatGPT, for example, where I have instructions and then I tell it, use it this way. I've also published a few public GPTs for people to use just to give them the same kind of shortcuts that I've created for myself, which is great. But one of the funnest things I've been doing lately, which is a little embarrassing and a little awesome, is I've been putting ChatGPT into voice mode. And I've picked Cole as the voice. And I have conversations where I brainstorm with Cole as if Cole was a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that inside a project so that I have fed Cole with the backgrounder information. And then I give Cole a role to play. So, you're either the best at this, or you're a specialist in this, or whatever. And then I have a conversation with Cole as if I was sitting next to someone and having a conversation. And again, because I've programmed ChatGPT to not be sycophantic, he doesn't just regurgitate the answers back to me. Oh, that sounds great. Well, he'll actually say, I say he like he's a person. ChatGPT will actually say, have you thought about this? Or let's expand about that further. Or, what are your thoughts on such and such? And so there's actually a dialogue there. It's a little freaky and a little awesome. Like I like it. I like it. It works really well because I work at all hours, right? And so I'm not going to call up a coworker at 9:00 at night and go, I'm just stuck thinking about such and such and I can't get out of my mind. I just need to talk about it. I do it with ChatGPT. And then the following morning, I send a note to the coworker saying, hey.
Yeah. Do you feel like you gain a lot of value from that? Because I feel like I've experimented with that a little bit. But I feel like when I tried that practice, it just repeated the things that I just said.
Yeah, no,
does it actually give you
it does. It does, because I give it a role and it's not the same role as me. I give it a collaborator role of some sort. So that's one piece of it. And then I've given it a construct. So in the project notes, I will have given it outside resources, links to thought leadership in that particular area, maybe some of the trends that are happening, etc., and just ask it to also have not really a debate, but to push me on the answers.
Yeah.
And to make me go deeper. Like, don't just take my high level response, ask probing questions based on my response, and force me to think about it in more detail.
What if I put all of my writing and all of the things that I've created into a ChatGPT and called it Kaylee AI so that you can just talk to me in AI?
I love that. It's just
I want to talk to Kaylee, but it's trying to talk at night.
Yeah, people are doing that. So
I have seen thought leaders and things like that. If you want to ask me a question, you can ask my chatbot, and it's trained on all their videos that they've created and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So Tony Robbins, it's interesting because he created a chatbot that answers questions as if he was answering them.
Yeah.
So, and it's available in his community if you buy into the platform. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think it's him and I want to say, is it Wayne Grandiosi? I don't know. We'll have to look up the other person's name. But the two of them together, they published basically it's kind of like a school platform, SKOOL. It's similar to that, but it's, Tony Robbins, and I'm going to have to remember his name. We'll put it in the notes. At least I'm not working from a cheat sheet here that I can't remember their name. But they literally created a chat platform that interacts with you as if you were talking to them, and then gives you the same practices, the ways that they frame questions, the way that they frame approaches to answers and to discovering things. It reacts to you in that way, which I thought was really
very interesting.
Really kind of interesting. So I would love to have a Kaylee AI that I could brainstorm with at 1:00 in the morning. That'd be great. But I will much prefer brainstorming with the person.
Exactly. People over AI.
I
would much rather do a conversation with a real person.
Yeah.
We go off of each other's ideas very well. Just jabble better than a robot would.
Yeah, I agree. When we do work together, it's very similar to how we're talking today, right? It's just very kind of free flow and, not necessarily highly structured.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges that people have with interacting with AI is AI by definition, because it's a technology, works best when it's highly structured. So it has a little bit of difficulty kind of going with a free flow. It'll lose track. It'll lose track of things that you've talked about in the past because it didn't understand the framework of where that idea needs to be sorted and go into. Whereas a human being, our neurological filing capabilities, at this point, at least far surpass AI.
I know like AI has these capabilities that are referred to as like learning and thinking and reasoning to kind of like compare it to how a human kind of processes information, but it's not actually learning. It's not actually thinking. It's not actually reasoning. It's doing something else. But those are just like the terms that are used to kind of compare it to a person. It doesn't process thoughts and process things the same way as a person actually would.
And in fact, one of the challenges that I have is it can only retain so much information in each chat.
Yes.
And so if you're really trying to work with it on a large project or on something where you might have 20 or 30 back and forths, it can lose sight of what you've already discussed, and it doesn't carry it through into the more current answers.
It's like the idea of AGI, like something that would solve that, like if it happens. I feel like I prefer
the retention part of it, I think is part of it. But at the end of the day,
bigger than that.
At the end of the day, I mean it's really like a filing and indexing system, which they aren't entirely sure how. There's been a lot of studies around it, but they're not entirely sure how human beings file and store and refer to learned information. They have a little bit more understanding of memory, like life memories, but they have less understanding of how we actually retain and recall knowledge. So I think it'd be really interesting to find out how they plan on or simulating that with artificial intelligence and AGI.
Yeah, the human brain is a very complex thing, and to kind of replicate that with machine, I'm curious to see where that's going to go, if it's going to happen. I'm leaning more towards like narrow AI solutions, like more niche solutions rather than like one AI that can do everything. I think that narrow solutions are probably going to be better in the long run.
I like that. The thing I like about that too is that it can be specialized for that purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
We work with people who talk about their technology being purpose-built, and there's a lot to be said for things being purpose-built. And just being able to narrow in on the use case, of course, it's going to be better at, just like a person is better when they're very vertically trained. It makes sense that AI would be better when it's very vertically trained so that it serves a particular purpose. That makes total sense.
Exactly.
And maybe, that's kind of where these platforms, like I was talking about Canva earlier, and that, there's dozens and dozens of SaaS platforms at this point that are integrating AI into it. They're doing it within the context of that platform, and so that makes, I think, perfect sense. So they've taken something that you can do out more broadly, and then they've brought it and allowed you to apply it within the work streams of what it is that you're actually trying to do, which I think is hugely valuable. And, at the end of the day, a lot of these platforms are creating APIs on purpose so that they can go into vertical applications, and so they can be deployed within a special purpose, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's best for the users too, because then they don't have to be AI generalists. Like, we're kind of AI generalists, right? Because we've been playing for years. So we're kind of AI generalists, but they get to be very specific to whatever their career is or the work that they're trying to do. They can focus in on that particular functionality that they're trying to do without having to worry about all of the broader context. I think we talk about the broader context because it's just, we're so highly interested in it, and we love to play and experiment and all those sorts of things.
And something like more specific, I was speaking with someone recently about this AI tool that helps like new sales reps get used to cold calling, and it's kind of like a mock cold call, and then the AI will grade them after and like give them feedback.
That's very cool.
And I think that like piece of narrow AI technology would be really good at that task, much better than ChatGPT would. Because ChatGPT is kind of like more general kind of thing. Even if you give it a prompt, like, I want you to pretend to do a mock cold call with me, I don't think it will do as good of a job as a narrow AI that was actually built to do that specific task, if that makes sense.
It does make sense because I imagine that learning model then would have had what works best, what elicits what kinds of responses. How does the human interact when you speak with them that way, or when you use that language, or when you use that terminology, or that phrasing, or that pacing, those call to actions. All of that stuff is so hyper specialized.
And it would also reduce hallucinations.
Yeah,
I feel like ChatGPT has such an issue with hallucinations.
it really does.
You could be talking about one thing, but since it's trained on so much data, it will bring up things that you're not even talking about. It'll switch up definitions because it's so broadly trained.
Yeah.
That's why more narrow AI solutions, I think that they're a lot less likely to have those issues.
I agree with that. And at this point, I'm trying to think if there's platforms that I'm working with that don't have some element of at least some sort of feature or function AI in it. I'm trying to think. I think most SaaS platforms that I work with in terms of creating work product, they've got that in there.
Yeah, I think everything I'm using right now has some kind of AI feature. Figma has AI now, Illustrator, Notion. I feel like everything has AI. That's why it kind of reminds me of the .com bubble, because all these companies were just adding .com into their business plan, and that's what all these venture capitalists were giving them money because they saw the .com. They were like, ooh, and now it's they see the AI feature powered by AI, and without asking questions, they're just ooh, let me give you money.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's part of it too, right? So for solution companies, they may be using AI to deliver a better solution, whether or not that solution actually has AI in it.
Mm-hmm.
So they may be using it just to help strategize or whatever, something as simple as creating a web page, something like Base 44, for example. You can just use natural language, spoken language, and you talk to it and tell it what you want it to build, and then it builds the interface for you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but we still need UX designers. We still need UX UI designers. I don't think AI is perfect at creating that human experience.
Well, really, that's the key. It's the experiential part when you talk about the customer journey. So they can create a page that might look aesthetic, but it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that the right workflow is there, or the right customer journey, or the right funnel is there. If it's a, sales landing page, for example, right? There's all those little nuances, to your point earlier, that are highly specialized, that require some understanding of human beings and how to interact with human beings for it to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is, I think, where a person needs to get involved in it. A person who understands human behavior, psychology, kind of how people respond to different things, a little bit of NLP and things like that would make it a better interface.
Because AI, it can analyze all the data it can, but it'll never have just the human touch, I think, which is so important.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But that's part of our value system. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because there's plenty of people who don't have that value system.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think that's kind of, when we get into earlier in the conversation when we were talking about some of the other uses of AI, it is important, I think, to work with AI aligned to your personal ethical values as an individual. And then if you're a company owner, just making sure that you're deploying AI within something that reflects your values as a company and how you want to treat your employees and your customers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So this was a really good conversation today. I'm so glad that you came and hung out with me in my living room. And so do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Yeah, I think that this tech is obviously really cool, has a lot of potential, but I do see a lot of stigma and discourse around it, particularly its environmental impact. And I feel like it's really important to have that conversation when we're talking about this. Energy consumption, training AI takes up a lot of energy, a lot of electricity, water to cool it. It's using a lot of fresh water. And it is impacting people's lives. People that live near data centers are definitely being impacted. So I feel like being mindful with it, because like I said earlier, it's projected to become a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's nothing that like anybody can do to stop that. Like literally,
Certainly nothing you and I can do to stop it.
So we need to like focus on using AI intentionally and using it for solutions that genuinely bring value. And there actually, like, despite this, there is potential benefits for AI for the environment. A lot of like climate modeling and predicting that AI can do that humans actually can't, and optimizing energy grids, reducing waste. And this is where narrow AI comes into, like providing these solutions, accelerating like material for science, for sustainability. Like I know there's AI solutions that are tracking like icebergs that are melting, and those are just things that a person can't do. Like these AI solutions are genuinely doing things good for their environment. And it's important that the AI industry focuses on these particular solutions, ones that are good for society, good for the environment, good for people, good in healthcare, and things like that.
Love it. I particularly love when you key in on some of the industries that will really benefit, where there's a cost benefit to that investment in power and energy. And when we talk about healthcare, that's one I think that could be a real game changer.
But I am worried about biases. There are a lot of racial biases and gender biases in healthcare data. And that healthcare data is what's training the AI. So that's something that we have to be very conscious of as well.
Yeah. There's been a gender bias in healthcare data for a very long time, because most studies have been historically done on males. And so there's already a lot of that. And then so this could do it at scale, right? So that's really scary. Bias at scale could be a really terrifying thing. For me, I think about it more from a perspective of, in particular, rare diseases and rare conditions, where the traditional healthcare industry, they really don't focus a lot of energy on things that fewer people have because there's less money in it. But if it's something that you could go and take it 80% of the way with AI, then something like that, you could actually bring more focus on some of the more rare diseases that just don't elevate themselves to the level of really money potential. These are corporates that make the decisions of where to spend the money to learn about different diseases. So I like it from that perspective, and creating a little bit more level playing field for some of the other kinds of medical conditions that aren't quote unquote typical.
Yeah, I was also like recently talking to someone about this like software that could potentially be used in hospitals, where it's kind of like a chatbot interface a little bit, but more of like a search engine. So like if a doctor's like really stumped, like they don't know what's going on with this patient, their colleagues don't know, just like punching all their symptoms into this database, and it'll go through like that millions of patients and millions of scenarios, and it might be able to do a tough diagnosis that people wouldn't be able to do. So I think that is
interesting.
That's a very interesting solution.
It's very interesting. So thanks again for coming today. I really appreciate that we were able to spend this time together. And I think we generated a really cool video that I'm hoping that folks will interact with. And please feel free to leave comments below about how you might be using AI or questions that you might have about AI. And we're happy to engage with you there. And I'm sure we'll be doing more conversations like this. So, if you feel inclined, also follow us or like and subscribe. And we hope to see you again in a future version.
Heck yeah, see you soon.
All right. There we go.